Before I get started, let's take a trip back to the 2023 NBA postseason. The Miami Heat, who were a 7th seed in the East with a 44-38 record, had made it all the way to the NBA Finals. They had went on a pretty stunning Cinderella-like run, which started in the first round where they blew the minds of everybody as they beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Then in the next round, they beat the Knicks, and finally they beat the Celtics, where they took a commanding 3-1 lead that eventually would dwindle down to being 3-3, but as we all know, they won in Game 7. Then you get to the finals where they faced the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. And make a long story short, they lost. They didn't stand a chance, but it was okay. Nobody expected for Miami to even get this far. They were a 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. Who in their right mind would expect them to make that big of a run to the playoffs? So nobody was mad. A lot of people were actually optimistic. It gave the fan base a level that they honestly hadn't seen since the 2010s with LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. And it gave all the fans some optimism that if the right pieces are put around Bam and Jimmy, they could go all the way. However, fast forward 2 years to 2025, and now the Miami Heat found themselves in the exact opposite position. Sure, they're playing solid basketball, but their star player, the player who was a big reason as to why they were able to make the NBA Finals, Jimmy Butler, wants out. He's gone. He said in the press conference on Thursday that he no longer wants to play for Miami Heat. He even went as far as saying that he wants to find his joy for basketball again. That is crazy, especially considering how he looked just a year ago or 2 years ago. Jimmy looked like he was having the time of his life. Especially what we know about Jimmy Butler as a player, it seemed like him in Miami was like a hand in a glove. But now Jimmy doesn't want to play there anymore, and at first the Heat tried to deny it. They tried to say that Jimmy wasn't going to go anywhere. We all know how this stuff usually goes with Patrick Riley. But Friday comes, the Heat say we are looking at trades for Jimmy Butler. And they even suspended him for 7 games due to his past 2 performances where they were just lackluster, just embarrassing, and it looked like a player who didn't want to be on the NBA court anymore. So that's where the Heat found themselves at now. They're at a mean crossroads, which honestly determines the future of their franchise. Now I'm sure everyone wondering the same thing. How do we get in this messy situation? Now Miami is not new to messy situations. They had to deal with a kind of a messy situation with LeBron back when he was trying to leave Miami to go back to Cleveland, and even earlier when they were dealing with their superstars like Shaq or Dwayne Wade. So Miami definitely has experience with big name players having conflict with the first office and eventually leaving. Now, as we all know, LeBron will go back to Cleveland, Dwayne will end up taking his talents to Chicago, and Shaq will get traded away as well. So it seems like the same thing is going to happen with Jimmy Butler. But everybody wants to know the same thing. How did we get here? Well, it's quite simple. Jimmy has been fed up with the franchise all year. It all started in the offseason when Jimmy was looking for an extension, and Miami wouldn't give it to him. Why? It's quite simple. Jimmy's a 35-year-old player in the NBA whose game is not predicated on shooting, it isn't predicated on any type of special ability outside of athleticism. He's straight slashing, he's good at passing, he's good at defense. That's kind of what his game revolves around, but those players don't really do so well as they age. But Jimmy, of course, is looking for his last big payday. Payday that Miami Heat were not willing to give him because of his age. Now, this is actually kind of crazy because the Heat are playing some pretty solid basketball this year. They've been doing it all season. But, like I said, the Heat haven't really taken any steps forward. They're tied for 5th in the East with the Milwaukee Bucks, and it doesn't look like they're going to go anywhere far in the playoffs. Despite players like Tyler Herro having a good season, Bam is having a pretty lackluster season, but a lot of the surrounding piece and role players are having their expected seasons, which is why the Heat find themselves in the position they do in the Eastern Conference. But Jimmy did get his payday, and the Heat aren't looking like they're going to do anything, which is really more so the front office's fault, specifically Pat Riley. They really haven't brought in any pieces or even made a run at any major pieces aside from Damian Lillard when he was looking to get traded from the Portland Trailblazers. And like I mentioned, after they played the Denver Nuggets in the finals, they had a huge, and I mean a huge opportunity to build around Jimmy Butler and turn the Heat into true contenders. Something that we have not seen in arguably over a decade. Now, it's only gained some traction recently this season, but like I mentioned beforehand, Jimmy's been frustrated since the offseason since they wouldn't get his payday. Now, from the Heat standpoint, they were just going to let it live. They were going to take it to the offseason and see what Jimmy does from there and move from that point on. Pat Riley even came out and said a week ago that they're not trading Jimmy Butler. Despite all the rumors, despite what everyone was saying, despite what reporters were saying, Jimmy was there to stay in Miami. But it wasn't until Jimmy said that he wanted out and he wasn't leaving, and he had those bad performances to show the front office that he just wasn't going to play very well and be more of a detriment to the team, where Miami sat back and said, okay, yeah, they're thinking we got to trade this dude away. So it makes sense. And now they're fielding trade offers, and hopefully they can get him shipped out before the trade deadline. Now, Butler is currently suspended as Miami tries to find him a new home. However, with the new CBA rules and kind of the aprons that they have teams on, it's kind of difficult to do that, especially with a contract as large as Butler's. And it seems like in order to move him, they're going to have to bring on a long-term contract themselves. But I don't think that they're trying to do that. If they make a move like this, they're definitely looking to rebuild or bare minimum retool this team. And I don't think bringing in a bunch of cap, a long-term player, would be in their best interest. And on top of this, 3 out of the 4 teams on Jimmy Butler's list would have to give up a significant part of their roster just to bring Jimmy on. The Suns would have to give up Bradley Beal, and if you're the Heat, why would you take on a contract like Bradley Beal's for Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler's a better player, and he fits in better with their timeline. The Mavericks and the Warriors are in the same boat. You get a significant part of your roster, cool, to get Jimmy Butler back. But does that really help you guys in the long run? Does that get you closer to winning the championship? In my opinion, it doesn't. And on top of giving up a significant part of your roster, you have to bring in a 3rd or 4th team just to add on, just for pieces, money, whatever is needed for the trade. The Heat are also not allowed to take in more salary than they would give away. Why? Because like I mentioned, they're an apron team. So this whole situation can kind of get messy. With all the moving pieces, with all the money involved, seems like this is going to be a very long and drawn out process. And on top of that, the Heat already have enough issues of their own with Jimmy Butler because Jimmy Butler is suspended. And with him being suspended, about $3 million of his salary is going to come out. Jimmy has filed a grievance, the NBA PA is behind him, but this doesn't really seem like something that Jimmy's really too concerned about because Jimmy has a pretty significant contract to where $3 million isn't really hurting his pockets like that. Now, of course, I understand. I don't have any money. If I had $3 million, if I was losing out $3 million, I would fight for that too. But I think this is deeper than the surface. I think Jimmy's just trying to send a message to the Miami Heat that he doesn't want to play there anymore. There are probably some underlying reasons that we don't know as well. And he's not going to give up $3 million for suspension that he doesn't feel justified. That's justified. Now, the end for Jimmy and the Heat is disappointing. I mean, they've been to the finals twice. They've been close to winning the finals and getting the NBA championship. They've had highs, they've had lows, they've been big name teams, they've dominated teams who aren't as good as them. So it's kind of underwhelming the fact that in Jimmy Butler's time in Miami, nothing is happening. Going into Miami, Jimmy fit the culture, he fit the blueprint, seemed like him and the front office got along, seemed like he was exactly what Miami needed and the number 1 option. But the end, seeing how it's playing out, isn't really that surprising. Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler are 2 stubborn figures. I mean, you just look at their history, their dealings with other teams, other players, the way they're acting right now isn't that different at all. They're 2 people who like to get what they want when they want it. And that's exactly what's happening now. Now, in my personal opinion, I can't blame A for not paying Jimmy. I wouldn't pay Jimmy either if I was in their position. Jimmy's 35-year-old, he's an aging player, he's still playing at a pretty high level, but how long can he sustain this play? But you want all of this money for a last big contract? I can't give it to you. Now, if I'm Jimmy, I'm not mad either. I've put up these amount of numbers. I've done this much for the franchise in my 5 years here. 2 finals appearances. One of them was unexpected. I literally had to put the team on my back. I want my money for my last big contract. Because let's be honest, he's 35. He's looking for a 3 to 4 year contract. This is his last big contract. More than likely, he's not going to be able to sustain this level of play. So he wants to get as much money before he retires. So I can't blame Jimmy either, but I also can't blame Miami. Now, what I can blame Miami for is their inability to build around Jimmy. Like I said, in all of this time of Jimmy being in Miami, can you name any significant move they made to help Jimmy out? It's clear that Bam wasn't enough. It was clear that Tyler wasn't enough. They needed some more pieces, or at least a team that was more conducive around Jimmy's skill set to take them all the way and match up against teams like Boston Celtics or even teams in the West like the Denver Nuggets and the Golden State Warriors. But they didn't do that. And that's the Heat's fault. And I mean, that's really all I have to say about it. And that's where I have to leave it until some type of news breaks. Jimmy Butler, a player who seemed like fit the Miami culture well, and Miami Heat, a team who's known for their strong culture, known for the way that they treat the players, was a pretty good pairing until it wasn't. But those are just my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys have to say in the comments. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure you leave a comment if you have something to say or you disagree with me. Everything is welcome. And subscribe if you're new because I'm releasing content like this all the time. But that's all I have. And until next time,